August 2025, night falls over London's skyline, glittering towers, silent streets, and shadows that once echoed with the cheers of stadium crowds. A luxury car idles outside a townhouse. Inside, police flashlights sweep through the dark. A framed football jersey lies cracked on the floor, the name on it, once cheered by thousands, now synonymous with scandal. He was a national hero, now a convicted criminal, a man who traded glory for greed, or rage, or jealousy. How could fame, fortune, and adoration twist into deceit, violence, and downfall? This wasn't about poverty or desperation, it was ego, arrogance, and the illusion of being untouchable. Some fled the scene of their crimes. Others sat calmly in courtrooms, eyes fixed on the floor as their legacies collapsed around them. Inside UK, notorious football stars who went from fame to prison. Welcome to UK Real Crime, where the roar of the crowd fades into silence, and the country's brightest athletes reveal their darkest sides. Today, we dive into the shocking downfall of British football's fallen idols, from murder and fraud to drugs and deadly mistakes, and the choices that turned promise into prison time. What you're about to hear may haunt you long after the final whistle. First offender, Gavin Grant, 29 years old. Once a forward for Bradford City, Grant's dark secret was a 2004 gang-style killing committed before his professional career began. Cleared of one prior murder in 2007, he was later found guilty in 2010 and sentenced to life. May 2004, Harlesden, northwest London. Night had fallen over the Stonebridge Park estate, a place long scarred by gang rivalries and easy violence. In those streets, 19-year-old Gavin Grant still believed football could lift him out of it, a talented forward who once dreamt of playing under stadium lights. But on that night, he crossed a line from promise to perdition. Leon Labastide, 21, was lured outside his parents' home by men he thought were friends. A brief argument, then 6 shots tore through his back. Neighbors later described hearing a burst of thunder, followed by the sound of a car speeding away. It was a cold execution, born of revenge over a burglary, rumored to have cost a local dealer £20,000 in drug money. Police traced the killing to a tit-for-tat feud that had already claimed other lives across the estate. Grant was not alone. Prosecutors said Damian Williams, the orchestrator, ordered the hit, while Gareth Downey and Grant carried it out. Hours after the murder, Grant was overheard boasting about the shooting. At that time, he was no longer the boy chasing a football on council pitches. He was an armed participant in a turf war. For years, silence shielded him. The community, fearful of reprisals, spoke little. But new witnesses came forward in 2009, prompting a retrial at the Old Bailey. Detectives described the case as one of the most dangerous spirals of gang violence in North London. The first jury had failed to reach a verdict, but in July 2010, the second found him guilty. In court, Grant stood motionless as the verdict was read. He was 26, wearing a dark suit, his gaze fixed ahead. Beside him, Downey received the same life sentence. Williams was convicted of conspiracy to murder. The judge called it a planned execution, handing down a minimum term of 25 years. From the gallery, a woman shouted, "It's all fixed, you're coming out." But the defendants were led away without reply. Outside court, Leon Labastide's mother, Diane Havel, spoke quietly. They were so-called friends who grew up with him. They destroyed his life, and their own. The family later moved from the area, terrified that memories of Stonebridge would always bring danger. After the sentencing, police reported a striking change. Shootings in the neighborhood dropped by nearly half, a rare sign that justice could bring calm where fear once ruled. Grant appealed his conviction 4 years later, arguing that police had failed to disclose information about a key witness. The Court of Appeal acknowledged concerns but rejected his claim, ruling that the evidence remained overwhelming. He remains in prison, serving a life sentence with no chance of release before 2035. The case exposed more than gang rivalry. It revealed how ambition can suffocate under the weight of environment and ego. Beneath the fame and fleeting success, the past never stopped chasing him. For communities still torn by violence, this story stands as a warning. Never let pride or silence turn loyalty into complicity. Never believe that reputation can erase accountability. And never assume proximity to danger leaves you untouched. It stains everyone near it. From stadium dreams to a prison cell, Gavin Grant's story reminds us Escaping the street means more than leaving it behind. It means leaving its code behind too. From gang violence on London's streets to domestic tragedy behind closed doors, our next case shows how fame offers no protection when anger and addiction collide. Second offender, Paul Conlon, 43 years old. December 24, 2020, Sunderland, England. It was meant to be a quiet Christmas Eve, a family reunion softened by age and forgiveness. But inside a small home on the outskirts of the city, an argument between father and son turned into a scene of unimaginable violence, one that would end with the death of a parent and the ruin of a former footballer's life. Paul Robert Conlon, once a promising striker for Hartlepool United and Sunderland, had lived his life between flashes of talent and moments of self-destruction. By the age of 42, his football career was long behind him. He was drinking heavily, up to 3 bottles of wine a day, and living under a restraining order that kept him away from his partner. That December, he found temporary refuge in his elderly parents' home, a decision that would prove fatal. The argument began shortly before 3 in the afternoon. Witnesses later described hearing shouting from inside the house. Conlon's father, 77-year-old Harry, exasperated after years of tension and his son's drinking, told him, "I've had enough of this." What followed was described in court as an explosion of rage. Conlon stumbled downstairs, visibly intoxicated, and attacked his parents. He struck his father repeatedly, knocking both him and his mother to the ground. The elderly man, frail and barely 5'5", was no match. Conlon sat astride him and punched him over and over in the head, throttling him and striking him with his footwear. His mother screamed for help as their daughter, Lindsay, phoned the police, fearing her brother would kill them both. When officers arrived, they found the 77-year-old bleeding, bruised, and struggling to breathe. At the police station, Conlon's intoxication was so severe that he reportedly asked officers if they knew who he was, referring to his former football career. Medical reports later confirmed his father had suffered multiple head injuries, a torn ear, and bleeding on the brain. 3 weeks later, on January 18th, Harry Conlon died in hospital from pneumonia caused by his injuries. Detectives charged Conlon with murder, but prosecutors later accepted a guilty plea to manslaughter. During the trial at Newcastle Crown Court in July 2021, the court heard that Paul Conlon had a history of violence, banned for life from football in 2004 after punching a referee, and convicted in 2013 for assaulting his wife. The judge described him as a man consumed by alcohol and anger, adding that the attack on his father was brutal, relentless, and cowardly. When the verdict was read, Conlon stood silently in the dock. His once athletic frame had withered, his face pale and heavy with exhaustion. As the judge sentenced him to 11 years and 10 months in prison, there was no visible reaction. His mother sat in the gallery, weeping. Outside the courtroom, police called it a tragedy that ruined many lives in one moment of rage. The community in Sunderland reacted with quiet disbelief that a former footballer once cheered on local pitches had become the man who killed his own father. Today, Paul Conlon serves his sentence in a British prison. His story is a chilling portrait of a man undone by pride, alcohol, and unchecked temper, a reminder that the greatest battles are often fought not on the field, but within ourselves. But not all violence comes with age or experience. Sometimes, it's youth itself, raw, reckless, and consumed by jealousy, that turns promise into horror. Third offender, Andrew Hall, 18 years old. A promising Stoke City Academy player, Hall's career ended before it began. He was convicted of murder in 2012, with his sentence increased to a minimum of 15 years on appeal. His jealous outburst left a nation horrified. June 9, 2012, Ampthill, Bedfordshire. A small English town, quiet and unassuming, found itself at the centre of national attention when a young footballer's promise turned into an act of horrifying violence. What began as a night of celebration ended in tragedy: the murder of 15-year-old Megan Lee Peat by her 18-year-old boyfriend, Andrew Hall. Andrew Hall was not an unknown name. A rising midfielder in Stoke City's academy, he had been praised as player of the season and was about to sign his first professional contract. Those who coached him described him as disciplined, focused, and talented, the kind of teenager destined for success. But behind that image was a darker temperament. Friends recalled his jealousy, his need for control, and a pattern of possessiveness that Megan had confided was getting too much. That night, Hall and Meghan were seen together at the Bumblebee pub in Flitwick, watching a Euro match with friends. Witnesses noticed Hall's mood shift as he drank heavily, reportedly more than twice the legal driving limit. When Meghan spoke to other friends, he accused her of flirting. The argument grew louder, and Meghan left in tears, saying she couldn't do this anymore. Yet later, she agreed to meet him again, hoping to calm things down. They were last seen hand in hand near the White Hart pub, heading towards a mutual friend's empty house. Inside that house, the argument reignited. Fueled by alcohol and jealousy, Hall's emotions spiraled into uncontrollable rage. In the kitchen, he grabbed 2 knives, a bread knife and a vegetable knife, and launched a ferocious assault. Forensic investigators later counted over 60 stab wounds to Meghan's head, neck, and chest. The violence was so frenzied that one knife snapped, leaving marks gouged into the laminate floor. At approximately 1:30 in the morning, Hall stumbled back outside, his clothes soaked in blood. "I think I've just killed my girlfriend," he told bouncers at the pub nearby. "I've ruined my life and my career." Police arrived within minutes. Meghan was found lying on the kitchen floor, her body surrounded by a pool of blood. The scene, one officer later said, was, beyond anything you could imagine, an act of complete loss of control. Hall was taken to hospital for a cut on his hand and arrested soon after. At Luton Crown Court, he pleaded guilty to murder. The judge described the attack as vicious, sustained, and senseless. Initially, Hall received a life sentence, with a minimum term of 10 years, but the Attorney General appealed, calling it unduly lenient. The Court of Appeal agreed, increasing his minimum sentence to 15 years. In court, Hall sat pale and silent as Meghan's parents spoke of eternal loss. Her father's words, "The pain of losing our beautiful daughter will stay with us forever," echoed through the courtroom. Tributes soon flooded social media, remembering Meghan's light and kindness. Hall's downfall became a chilling reminder that jealousy and rage can destroy everything, love, promise, and future alike. Beneath talent and ambition, unchecked insecurity turned potential into tragedy, proving that no success can endure when anger overpowers reason. From a teenager's rage to a veteran's deception, the next fall from grace didn't spill blood, but it destroyed lives all the same. A hero of faith and football turned fraudster. Fourth offender, Richard Rufus, 48 years old. January the 12th, 2023, London, England. Inside Southwark Crown Court, one of English football's most admired defenders stood not as a legend, but as a convicted fraudster. Richard Rufus, once hailed as Charlton Athletic's greatest ever centre-back, had fallen from grace. The man who once commanded stadiums with discipline and leadership had, for years, quietly orchestrated a deception that stripped friends, family, and fellow churchgoers of their life savings. Rufus's story began in admiration. A loyal one-club man, he made nearly 300 appearances for Charlton Athletic between 1993 and 2004. Fans adored him. He was the hero of Wembley's 1998 playoff final, the defender who scored the equaliser that sent Charlton to the Premier League. But after a knee injury ended his career prematurely, the applause faded. He became a church ambassador, a mentor to youth, and a man of faith, or so it seemed. Between 2007 and 2010, Rufus launched what appeared to be an exclusive investment opportunity. Using his reputation as a trusted Christian figure and former football star, he told friends, relatives, and members of the Kingsway International Christian Centre that he was a successful foreign exchange trader. He promised profits of up to 60%, calling it low risk and high reward. Investors included fellow footballers, church leaders, and ordinary people who believed in him, more than 100 victims in total. In reality, Rufus ran a multi-million-pound Ponzi scheme using new investors' funds to repay old ones. He faked documents, invoked famous names, and over 3 years took £15 million, half lost, much spent on luxuries like a Bentley Rolex watches and a £9,000 a month mortgage. As the scheme unraveled, investors begged for answers. Rufus reassured them, "Your money's safe," even as panic spread. For many, it was their life savings. One victim said, "He didn't just steal money, he stole our peace of mind." Investigators uncovered falsified records and unauthorized trading. Rufus denied wrongdoing, claiming good faith, but the evidence was damning. After a 5-week trial, he was convicted of fraud, money laundering, and unlicensed activity. Calm but defeated, he heard the judge say, "You lived a lie at the expense of others." Rufus received 7.5 years in prison and a repayment order of £370,000. The fallout was profound. Many victims were left bankrupt, some suffered severe mental health issues, and families were torn apart. One investor said, "He preached faith but delivered deceit. It was death by 1,000 lies." For the public, the case of Richard Rufus became a symbol of betrayal, a reminder that even heroes can corrupt the trust that built their legacy. From football fame to financial fraud, his downfall revealed how pride, entitlement, and illusion can destroy not only a man's reputation, but the very people who once believed in him. In the end, his legacy was rewritten, not in goals or victories, but in the echo of broken trust that no sentence could ever restore. If Rufus betrayed trust through illusion, the next group chose greed through coordination. 6 footballers, teammates once, now partners in one of Britain's largest drug empires. Fifth offender group, 6 semi-pro footballers, ages 25-35. Adam Pepara, Shaquille Hippolyte Patrick, Jamal Joseph, Andrew Harewood, Melchi Emmanuel Williamson, and Luke Skeet formed a highly organized criminal network. Arrested after encrypted phone evidence, they faced one of Britain's biggest football-linked drug sentences in 2024. May 17, 2024, London, England. In a courtroom at Isleworth Crown Court, a line of 6 men stood shoulder to shoulder, not teammates on a pitch, but defendants in one of Britain's largest drug trafficking cases. Among them was Adam Pepara, a 35-year-old former semi-professional footballer who had once captained Evesham United and worn the badge of Enfield Town. What began as a dream to make it in football ended in a 24-year prison sentence for running an industrial-scale cocaine and ketamine network worth hundreds of millions. Pepara's rise and fall reflected a story of ambition turned greed. Described by coaches as disciplined and driven, he spent years in lower league football, respected but never wealthy. Friends said he was determined to make something of himself. When his playing days faded, that hunger for success did not. Instead, it shifted off the field into the shadows of the criminal underworld. Between April and October of 2022, he led a group of fellow semi-professional footballers in a sophisticated conspiracy to flood Britain with high-grade drugs. Investigators later said their network ran like a business empire. Using encrypted phones, coded language, and secure messaging platforms, they moved over 2.7 tons of cocaine and large quantities of ketamine across London, Birmingham, and beyond, drugs with an estimated street value of up to £260 million. Pepara, operating from his home in Solihull, was at the top of the hierarchy, directing logistics and transactions. His accomplices, Shaquille Hippolyte Patrick, Jamal Joseph, Andrew Harewood, Melchi Emmanuel Williamson, and Luke Skeet, handled storage, transportation, and distribution. The operation collapsed in October 2022 when police stopped Luke Skeet and found cocaine and a phone with encrypted drug messages. Months of forensic work exposed a network of 6 footballers moving cocaine across the UK. By September 2023, coordinated raids in London and Birmingham uncovered cash, drugs, and devices. All 6 pleaded guilty. The judge called Adam Pepara's role commanding and calculated. He received 24 years in prison, while his accomplices got 13 to 18, over 100 years combined. As the verdict was read, Pepara stood motionless, his athletic build now tense, his expression blank. Outside court, Detective Inspector Adam McCarthy told reporters, "These men once inspired others on the field. Instead, they chose greed, spreading drugs that destroy lives." The case shocked both the sporting community and the public. For many, it symbolized how the pursuit of wealth can twist ambition into criminality. What was once a team built on passion and teamwork became an empire built on deceit and destruction. Now serving his sentence, Adam Pepara's story remains a stark reminder that success without integrity leads only to downfall. From the football pitch to a prison cell, his legacy stands as proof that no amount of money can outrun the truth. Yet, not every downfall is hidden in encrypted phones or back-alley deals. Some play out under the spotlight, arrogance exposed, cameras rolling, reputations collapsing in real time. 6th offender, Marlon King, 34 years old. A talented Premier League striker whose repeated offences destroyed his career. King served multiple jail terms and was labelled a serial offender by the judge. Once cheered in stadiums, he became synonymous with scandal. October 2009, London, England. Once celebrated for his goals in the Premier League, Marlon King now stood in the dock at Southwark Crown Court, no longer a football hero but a convicted sex offender. The man who had risen from non-league obscurity to national recognition, playing for clubs like Watford, Wigan Athletic, and Birmingham City, was about to see his reputation destroyed by his own arrogance, violence, and a long pattern of criminal behavior. Marlon Francis King had everything an aspiring footballer could want: wealth, fame, and talent. In 2006, he was the Championship's top scorer and was hailed as one of England's most dangerous strikers. But behind the fame lay a man with deep-seated anger and entitlement, traits that had surfaced in over a dozen previous convictions. By the time of his trial, King had already been in court 14 times for theft, assault, and dishonesty. Judges and club managers described him as a man who refused to learn. On the night of December 10, 2008, King was celebrating in a Soho nightclub following a match. Surrounded by friends, he drank heavily, boasting about his lifestyle and career. When he approached a 20-year-old university student on the dance floor, she rejected his advances. Witnesses said he told her, "I'm out of your league, love. I'm a multi-millionaire." Moments later, he groped her, and when she pushed him away, he punched her in the face with such force that her nose broke instantly. 2 bystanders were knocked down in the chaos. King denied everything, claiming mistaken identity, and even called his wife and brother to testify in his defense. The jury, unconvinced, found him guilty of sexual assault and assault occasioning actual bodily harm. The judge described him as arrogant, disrespectful, and completely without remorse, sentencing him to 18 months in prison and ordering him to register as a sex offender. Wigan Athletic immediately terminated his contract, costing him over £1 million in wages. But even prison did not change him. By April 2013, King was again behind the wheel of a luxury Porsche on the A46 in Nottinghamshire. Witnesses described his driving as aggressive and reckless. Eating an ice cream while overtaking a slower vehicle, he slammed on his brakes in frustration, causing a 3-car pileup. One of the victims, Martin Beck, had to be airlifted to hospital with a shattered arm that required major surgery. King initially fled the scene, only to return minutes later, attempting to blame the victim. In May 2014, Marlon King received another 18-month sentence and a 3-year driving ban. The judge called it arrogant road rage of the worst kind. Once adored, he now faced silence. No clubs, no applause. His lawyer said he was genuinely remorseful, though many doubted it. Years of unchecked ego and aggression had consumed him. Rejection felt like humiliation, and fame justified everything. After serving his time, King vanished from the spotlight, moving abroad with his family. Once a celebrated striker, his name now lives on only in crime archives, a haunting symbol of talent undone by arrogance. In the end, Marlon King's legacy was not measured in goals, but in wasted potential, proof that talent without humility can destroy everything it builds. For one Premier League star, violence found a different form, not in fists or fame, but behind the wheel of a car on a dark November night. 7th offender, Lee Hughes, 28 years old. The former West Brom striker killed passenger Douglas Graham after a collision in 2003. Jailed for 6 years in 2004, he served half. His post-release return to football drew heavy public criticism. November 23, 2003, near Coventry, England. On a quiet country road just after midnight, a silver Mercedes coupe collided head-on with a Renault carrying a family home from a late-night gathering. Within seconds, 1 life was ended, 2 more were shattered, and 1 man's glittering football career was gone forever. The driver of that Mercedes was Lee Hughes, West Bromwich Albion's star striker, known to fans as the Ginger Ninja. At 27, Hughes was living the dream. A lifelong West Brom fan turned local hero, he had scored over 30 goals in a single season and was one of the most prolific forwards in English football. Off the pitch, he was charismatic and well-liked, but those who knew him said success had brought arrogance and a dangerous disregard for consequence. That night, after drinking whiskey in 2 pubs, Hughes got behind the wheel of his £100,000 Mercedes with 2 passengers. He was well over the limit. Witnesses saw Hughes's car speeding and swerving before it struck a Renault head-on. 56-year-old Douglas Graham died instantly. Driver Albert Frisby was left severely injured. Hughes fled the scene, vanishing for 36 hours to avoid a breath test. Public outrage grew as evidence showed he'd been drinking and driving recklessly. In court, he claimed his brakes locked, but jurors rejected his story. After a 6-day trial at Coventry Crown Court in August 2004, he was found guilty of causing death by dangerous driving, his fall from football hero to convicted felon marking one of the sport's darkest scandals. As the verdict was read, the courtroom erupted. Douglas Graham's widow, Maureen, cried, "Yes," through tears. The judge condemned Hughes's behavior as showing callous disregard for human life, noting that fleeing the scene magnified his guilt. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison, half of which he would serve before release. When Hughes was led away, he stood expressionless, his once proud posture slumped, the confident footballer now reduced to an inmate. Outside, the public reaction was intense. The road safety charity Break called for harsher penalties, insisting that no one's fame should protect them from justice. His club, West Bromwich Albion, immediately terminated his contract, ending the fairy-tale career of their hometown idol. After serving 3 years, Hughes was released in 2007. He returned to football with Oldham Athletic, a decision that divided public opinion. Some fans cheered his second chance. Others, including the surviving victims, called it a disgrace. Mr. Frisbee later said, "He's shown no remorse. He killed a man and just walked away." Years later, Hughes expressed regret, claiming he lived daily with guilt, but the stain of that night never faded. What began as a night of celebration became a moment of irreversible destruction, a reminder of how one reckless choice can erase decades of achievement in a heartbeat. From stadium cheers to prison silence, Lee Hughes's downfall remains one of British football's most haunting tragedies, proof that no talent, no fame, and no excuse can ever undo the cost of a single fatal decision. And finally, not every tragedy begins with intent. Sometimes it's a moment's lapse, a single second that changes 2 families forever. 8th offender, Lucas Akins, 35 years old. The Mansfield Town forward admitted his role in a fatal collision, expressing deep remorse. He was released later that year and rejoined his club, sparking debate about redemption in sport. March 17, 2022, a quiet rural lane outside Huddersfield. A cyclist named Adrian Daniel was riding home from work, minutes away from his family, when a Mercedes G-Wagon pulled out from a junction. Within seconds, the calm of the countryside turned to tragedy. Behind the wheel was 35-year-old Lucas Akins, a professional footballer, father of 3, and community role model. Akins had lived a life defined by discipline and professionalism. Born in Huddersfield, he climbed the ranks of English football, playing for clubs like Tranmere Rovers, Burton Albion, and Mansfield Town, and even representing Grenada internationally. Teammates described him as a model professional, quiet and humble, a man who avoided trouble. But that March afternoon, while driving his daughters to a piano lesson, a single misjudgment changed everything. At the junction of Crossland Factory Lane and Huddersfield Road, Akins slowed but failed to notice the oncoming cyclist. He pulled out. The collision was instant and devastating. Mr. Daniel, aged 33, was thrown from his bike, suffering catastrophic head injuries. He was taken to hospital, where he died 10 days later. The headcam footage recovered from his bike would later become the central evidence in court. Police investigations found no trace of alcohol, drugs, or speeding. This wasn't a reckless chase or criminal stunt, it was a momentary lapse in concentration. But as prosecutors told Leeds Crown Court, a moment's inattention can cost a life. Akins insisted he had stopped at the junction and looked both ways, but simply didn't see the cyclist. For the victim's family, those words offered little comfort. For nearly 3 years, the case wound through the justice system. Akins continued his football career, balancing matches with court dates. His decision to delay a guilty plea angered the victim's widow, Savannah Daniel, who called it 3 years of hell. When he finally admitted guilt in early 2025, she said, "Turned our lives into a nightmare. But I don't want his children to suffer as mine have. We do not need any more lives to be destroyed." In April 2025, Akins was sentenced to 14 months in prison for causing death by careless driving and banned from driving for 2 years. Judge Alex Menery described him as a fundamentally decent man with strong mitigation, a devoted father and respected athlete, but ruled that only immediate custody reflected the gravity of the offense. As the sentence was read, Akins stood silent, his head bowed, tears visible as his wife wept in the gallery. Public reaction was divided. Some condemned the leniency, while others defended the footballer's integrity and remorse. Mansfield Town, his club at the time, faced backlash for fielding him just days before sentencing. police used the case to remind drivers of the dreadful consequences of even momentary carelessness. When Akins walked free 7 months later, he was quietly reinstated at Mansfield Town, not as a hero, but as a man forever changed. The once celebrated forward returned to the pitch, carrying a burden heavier than any defeat. From this tragedy emerged hard lessons. Focus on the road. No matter how routine the journey, never underestimate the impact of a second's distraction, and understand that responsibility behind the wheel is shared with every life around you. In the end, one family lost a son and another lost its peace. A single lapse, just one, proved that tragedy often comes not from malice, but from a moment you can never take back. As the cell doors close and the stadium lights fade, one question remains: how does fame turn into downfall so easily? These were men who once had everything: adoration, money, a future. Yet, behind every goal and every cheer, there was a secret waiting to unravel. In the world of football, the game doesn't always end when the whistle blows. Sometimes it ends in handcuffs. If these stories gripped you, there are more hidden truths waiting beneath the surface of Britain's darkest cases. Subscribe to UK Real Crime and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the shocking real stories behind fame, power, and crime. The next case may be closer to home than you think.